Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get you the latest on the escalating Israel-Hamas conflict. It is day 20 of the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said his goal against the Hamas war is saving the nation, and he has promised that a ground incursion to destroy Hamas in Gaza will begin soon. He said Israel is getting ready for a ground operation but will not share when or how. In an address to the nation, Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel is in the midst of a fight for our existence. The war's two aims are to eliminate Hamas by destroying its military and governance capabilities and to do everything possible to get our hostages back. And joining me tonight is a very special guest from Israel. We have with us former Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Ehud Barak. So first and foremost, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
So first and foremost, let me ask you, why the delay in Israel's ground invasion of Gaza? By all accounts, that is the next stage of the war.
I cannot go into the detail. I'm not even sure that I know all the details, but there are many considerations. This operation that has to go on the ground because we want to eliminate, as you have mentioned, the physical military capabilities of Hamas in Gaza Strip and put them out of power there. That cannot be completed just from the air, from airstrikes. So we have to deploy probably many thousands of soldiers on the ground, or probably a few thousand, but a long time, and making more and more operations. But this operation is taking place under 4 different constraints. Number 1 is the hostages that you have already mentioned. Number 2 is the risk that it will spread into a regional war with the Hezbollah in the north, or probably others. Number 3 is the international law. Israel committed to the international law. We don't want to repeat the standards of these barbaric terrorists, Al-Qaeda-like. And number 4 is the question, okay, assume that we finished. In 3 months from now, we took over Hamas and erased all its military capabilities. To whom we pass the torch, the ruling of the Gaza Strip. These are 4 constraints, and because they are interconnected and develop a long time, we cannot make trajectory. I cannot tell you what will happen. We have to trust our war cabinet and our Supreme Command of the Armed Forces.
So you've touched upon some very important points. I want to dwell on them one by one. But first, let me ask you, is there pressure from countries like the United States for Israel to not go ahead with a ground invasion?
No, I don't think that the United States pretends to be able to dictate to Israel. Israel is sovereign. We suffered a major blow, probably the most severe blow that we suffered since the establishment of Israel, which is about the same time of the establishment of India. And it was really unprecedented attack, slaughtering civilians. No freely elected government can afford sitting idle and not responding to it very forcefully. So it's not the case that we just invented it. We have to do it, and we will do it. And on the way, we will have to take into account all these constraints that I've mentioned.
All right. You're quite right, sir. The butchery and savagery that Hamas displayed while torturing and killing Israelis was heart-wrenching. And my heartfelt condolences, sir, over the loss of lives in Israel. But coming back to the war, which is currently on, are you concerned that hostages, and there are more than 200 of them, could end up as collateral damage in case of a ground assault by Israel?
It's risk. There are many risks in them, and it's not an incident that Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that it is one of the objectives of the war. He made it almost equal to the need to take over the Hamas. Of course, it's not exactly the same because we have compelling imperative to get rid of Hamas capabilities, and we also have a moral and personal commitment to those people. They found themselves as a result of a failure of our defense forces, they were hijacked. It was not a great success, it was a major failure. And so there is a moral commitment to them. So it's very delicate, and I think that you will understand that we cannot discuss the details because, Channel 9 in India is watched in the whole world, and probably even the Hamas is listening. We cannot discuss what exactly should be taken, but I'm confident that it's taken into account very seriously. We now, in the recent hours, we heard about certain initiative. I'm sure the Americans, the Egyptians, the Qataris, the Swiss, the Germans, they are all discussing these issues, trying to promote certain solutions that will release, let's say, at least the children, the women, or very elderly people.
You're right, sir. This is a very sensitive matter, and some reports suggest that they might be willing to release as many as 50 hostages in the coming days, but then you never know with these terrorists. Now, you touched upon this important issue, and I know there are no easy answers, but as a journalist, I still need to ask you this question. What is Israel's end game, sir? And what is the exit strategy? Let's say you achieve your stated objective of wiping out Hamas. The biggest question is who replaces Hamas, and how do you know that the new regime will not be inimical or hostile to Israel?
I will tell you an anecdote. Some 15 years ago, I was Minister of Defense, and we happened to have every 2 years, let's say, a round of clashes with the Hamas that usually ended with certain understanding mediated by the Egyptians that provides calm period for another 2 years. So on the way to some of these rounds, I approached Mubarak, president of Egypt, and told him, look, we think of crashing Hamas, removing its military capabilities. It was easier then than now. It will probably take 6 weeks. Why don't we put an end to it once and for all? You will demand us from the first day to withdraw without condition. After, let's say, 6 weeks, we will agree to withdraw, but we will put one condition. We want you to take over from us. You will arrange in the meantime some multinational Arab force led by Egypt, probably with soldiers also from Morocco or the Emiratis or Bahrainis or Manis, doesn't matter. And you take care of the Gaza Strip, keep it quiet for limited periods, 3 or 6 months, during which you will bring back gradually to the Gaza Strip the original internationally recognized owner of the place, which is the Palestinian Authority. Probably your viewers cannot remember it, but originally, after the Oslo Agreement in the mid-90s, Gaza Strip was given to the Palestinian Authority, now led by Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas. And I told him, why don't we push it to him? So Mubarak told me, oh, no, Barak, you conquered the Gaza Strip in 1967. Since then, it's yours. It's not mine. I'm not going ever to put my hands back into the Gaza Strip. So I went to Abu Mazen himself and asked him. And to cut a long story short, he told me the following: Barak, I cannot afford coming back to power in Gaza Strip sitting on Israeli bayonets. I didn't like the answer, but it makes sense as a Palestinian logic. That was the situation 15 years ago, but now it changed. Since then, we had another 15 years of peace, stable peace, with deep cooperation with Egypt and Jordan, and we have the Abraham Accords with the Emiratis and others, and we even had until a few weeks ago the discussion about trilateral deal with the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. So probably now it's not impossible to think that we will pass it to multinational Arab force backed by UN Security Council resolution, probably the Arab League as well, and backed by financially by the Qataris and the Saudis, and bring back Abu Mazen, Palestinian Authority, to the Gaza Strip and give them a big push in the economy by subsidizing and investing in major development. That could be a direction, something like this or something in the same kind of form, but some different details.
Okay, that is very interesting. In fact, sir, just last week, I interviewed another former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, your namesake, who said, Mahmoud Abbas is a reasonable man, and we believe we can do business with him. We can bring back peace in negotiations with Mahmoud Abbas. But you know, it's interesting. You talked about the role of some of the other regional players like Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar. Sir, I'm sure you do realize that as you try and wipe out Hamas, the leadership of Hamas and possibly the masterminds of the terror attacks on Israel are sitting in the comfort, luxury, and safety of Qatar as we speak.
Yeah, I know it, and Qatar is different from Qatar. They back Hamas all along the way. Even Netanyahu allowed them to pour into the Gaza Strip tens of millions in cash every month. So basically, I do not want to discuss Qatar on the same road. Egypt and Jordan, they might be ready to cooperate with the kind of scheme that I've just described if, and I believe only if, they see a genuine readiness in the Israeli government once the war is over to discuss new ideas, to use this war as an opportunity to change certain things that were ignored in the recent years under Netanyahu. I'm not sure that's the right timing to talk about it because we are at war and we are now focused on winning the war and solving the hostages issue and making sure it's not spread to the north. So we have many other issues, but having said that, it's clear that the long-term interest of Israel fits in the two-state solution. And we should never lose sight of it. You know, the old Romans had a saying, if you don't know which port you want to reach, no wind will take you there. And I think that that's the right vision. I never lost eye contact with it, but you have to know that it's a big debate in Israel. For example, Netanyahu and the right wing in Israel, who is now in power, They believe differently. They believe in one state. I think that it's wrong, but it's a debate that should be solved within the Israeli body politic. And for sure, that's not the time to deal with it. First of all, we have to win. It would be better if we can assure in some way Sisi in Egypt and King Abdullah in Jordan that Israel will be open together with the United States to consider the new situation, new landscape, once we eliminate military capability of Hamas and make sure that someone else who is more peaceful mind or more pro-normalization sits in Gaza Strip and control it.
So you made a very important statement in this interview. You are a former Prime Minister of Israel and you are saying you believe in the two-state solution. Any Palestinian will tell you that is exactly what they want and have been demanding for decades. But it is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu who has almost made it impossible for a two-state solution to become a reality.
Yeah, but that's something that will not be solved between myself and you as a very good anchor in India, or even between me and any Arab leader. This should be decided within Israel, and I believe that the kind of debate will start once again once we win this war. And, you know, to tell you honestly, it's not just our responsibility. Most of the burden of not having, until now, a two-state solution is not on Israeli shoulders. It's on the Palestinian shoulders, not just Hamas, even the Palestinian Authority. I still remember Arafat, and later on, I tried with Arafat. Later on, it was Olmert that you have mentioned, who tried it with Abu Mazen. And we could never reach the point where an agreement, a breakthrough can be announced. And terror was not in short supply at any moment. So, you know, the Palestinians have to change. We have to solve the debate before the way will be ripe for moving forward in the direction of two-state solution.
All right. So coming back to the war. There are some who are asking, could a ground invasion of Gaza be a very dangerous trap for Israel, just like the Vietnam War was for the Americans? Parallels are being drawn between the labyrinth of underground tunnels and bunkers under Gaza and the threat of ambushes and booby traps. What is your take?
It's quite possible that what they prepared. They expected that we will come in force after such an operation, so probably they prepared. But I still confident that once we start an operation, we understand, we send professional soldiers and reservists that had these 2.5 weeks, certain opportunity to train themselves. We mobilize them immediately after the event in 7th of October. And I'm confident that we cannot bypass the price of a war. We'll have to see or to invest toil and sweat and tears and blood, but we will win. Israel is not under existential threat from the Hamas and won't be under existential threat even if the Hezbollah will make a mistake and join it. We mobilized 350,000 reservists beyond our normal kind of regular standing army. We have now the American backing. Airlift is coming day by day to Israel to bring more ammunition, more spare parts, more other equipment that we need to fight the war. And America sent aircraft carrier, probably even 2 of them, to the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea to be a deterrence vis-a-vis the Iranians, a deterrence vis-a-vis the Hezbollah, probably certain deterrence and assurance for the government of Lebanon that they could be put out of it if they behave responsibly and so on. So with this deployment, we are ready. We understand that there is no way to avoid the clash with the Hamas. And together with the hostages, these are the 2 elements that we are focused on.
Okay, I will talk to you about the US and Lebanon in a moment. But before that, the UN and many others now, sir, are demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Is there any scope for it, or is it completely ruled out at this stage?
I don't think that anything is completely ruled out or completely inevitable. We're listening to the UN, we're listening to the Americans. I told you that we are committed to the international law. We are fully aware of the fact that in spite of the almost wall-to-wall kind of backing and support we get for the legitimacy of our attacks, this will erode quite quickly along the time when more and more civilians on the other side will be hit. But you have always to remember, and we ask friends and observers all around the world to remember, we are warning day by day, every neighborhood we are going to go, we tell them, whoever knows that you have any Hamas activity in the building where you live or the place where you work, be careful, it's become a target and we will hit it. And whether it was a munition depot or a rocket launcher or training site or some office or communication center, it's a target. Please leave. Over 700,000 people already moved to the safe area on the southern part of the Gaza Strip following our warnings, but the Hamas holding in kind of pointing a gun to the heads of those who remain, and still control some 300,000 civilians, innocent civilians who are used by them deliberately as human shields. We try to avoid, to minimize to the extent possible the loss of life among them, but we cannot think seriously of giving the Hamas perpetrators of this terrible attack on Israel impunity by allowing them to use innocent citizens of Gaza as human shield.
Let me flip this around, sir. There is no justification for what Hamas did to Israelis, but I do need to ask you some tough questions. You referred to eroding support. So let me ask you this. There are many who are saying what the New York Times recently stated, and I'm quoting them. They said Israel has suffered a horrifying terror attack and deserves the world's sympathy and support. But it should not get a blank check to slaughter civilians or to deprive them of food, water and medicine. We must not kill Gazan children to protect Israeli children. How would you respond to that, sir?
I respond that I say to the world, don't worry. Israel take very seriously the international law. Any target is approved once and again by different teams at different moments and with legal advisor side by side. And no Israeli commander will never order dropping a bomb on a hospital or school or any other installation where people are actively there. So don't worry, we take this responsibility upon ourselves. There are already corridors, humanitarian corridors. We will not let hospitals become with no medical kind of supply because of Israeli kind of blockade. And no shortage, they will not allow shortage of milk for babies or whatever. We understand exactly the law. The only point that we insist is that it's not equal. We are not killing, unlike the attack on Israel, which was deliberate to slaughter people, elderly, kids, women, whatever, citizens, civilians. Here we are trying to hit those who perpetrated this crime against humanity. And on the way, we try to do our best to avoid it. We will not cause any humanitarian suffer that could be solved through any arrangement that does not give impunity to the Hamas and does not help them to kill our soldiers.
Okay, sir, you know, the criticism against Israel is that it is countering atrocities with atrocities, war crimes with war crimes, and imposing a collective punishment on Palestinians for what Hamas did. You referred to this earlier, so I'll ask you again. Are you concerned that the opinion of the world could change very fast in favor of the Palestinians and against Israel?
I'm aware from previous events that we, in spite of all efforts, we usually gradually lose the support of the world because people all around the world have a short memory. They forget very quickly these atrocities. They forget after 10 days or so what happened to Israeli, and they kind of find themselves identifying with the suffering of the Palestinians without asking who is causing it. Who is causing it? It's caused by their own, by the same criminals who made the crimes against humanity in Israel. They made crimes against humanity in Gaza by handing a gun pointed to the temple. They hold civilians, innocent civilians, as their human shields. And we cannot afford letting them kind of, I mentioned it earlier, no other country would behave differently. No. You know, if you think we are talking with the American, I tell them the equivalent of the 1,500 people that we lost in this event, if we would have to talk with American equivalent, it might be losing, let's say, even in 9/11, what would have happened if America would lose 60,000 people, not 3,500, 60,000 people. I know for sure that America already sent their forces over half of the globe to kill Daesh and Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan or later on in Mosul in Iraq. And we do it for those kind of criminals against humanity just over our border. So I'm aware of the criticism. I think that if we were more effective in reminding the world in your TV channel and all along, around the world about the real causal chain of these events, we might have more support. We are aware of it. We are trying to our best, but we will not give up on our determination to destroy the military capabilities of Hamas. It might take time, might take longer than I think now, but we will do it.
Okay. It's interesting you talked about the US. You know, very recently, President Biden told Prime Minister Netanyahu, we made mistakes after 9/11, and we hope Israel will not make the same mistakes. But coming back to Palestinians, sir.
Let me answer this. You know, we listen very carefully. We listen. Biden is a great friend of Israel, and he showed in deeds, not just in words, how much he supports Israel. He even made moving gestures with the people who lost their beloved ones in this massacre, and we are listening to him very seriously. But having said that, we know about the mistakes that the Americans did in Afghanistan and later on in Iraq. We try to take it into account, but remember once again, that does not happen on the other side of the world. It happened just sometimes a few dozens of meters over the border. There is a small village called Netiv Asara who starts 10 meters from the barrier, from the border. So they can even throw hand grenades to this village without crossing the border. We cannot afford having them. No one will be ready to live in these places if such event as the one happened 2.5 weeks ago can repeat itself.
All right. Now, Israel says we are defending ourselves. I interviewed a Palestinian in Gaza just yesterday. He's called Yusuf Hamash. He asked one question on my show, sir. Is killing thousands of innocent people, including children, and destroying thousands of homes Israel's idea of self-defense? Is there something you would want to say to Yusuf?
Yeah, I can tell Yusuf Hamash only that, unfortunately, under the blow that we suffered, we reached the conclusion that the reason for it is that the Gazans allow Hamas to rule over them. And Hamas is not just ruling the people. There are 2.2 million Palestinians. They are not just ruling them. They use them as a human shield. And they use the whole Gaza infrastructure as a basis to sow terror on the other side of the border. So the causal change starts with the intention of Hamas and with the operations of Hamas. We are responsible. We try to minimize we genuinely respect the international law. We know that we need the support of the world, and it's understanding that for the steps we are taking. So we are trying our best, but there is one limit. We cannot give impunity to Hamas. What Yusuf Hamash does not understand, that Israel cannot agree to see its citizens slaughtered physically like barbarians hundreds of years ago in other places, slaughtering your citizen just because that's what came to their mind. That's what the way they see Israel. We cannot afford it, and we have to make sure that they're unable to act. If Yusuf Hamash and the other innocent citizens of Gaza would push Hamas out, or would call the Palestinian Authority to come there, or do whatever other thing to block them, there would be no reason and no result. There would be no cause for this operation of us, and it would not have happened.
Okay. Sir, you talked about slaughtering of citizens. So I want to share some figures with you and our viewers. 1,400 Israelis were killed on the 7th of October by Hamas terrorists. And now over 7,000 Palestinians, including 3,000 children, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. I spoke to Palestinian legislator Mustafa Barghouti, and he asked this question, sir. I'm going to put this question to you on his behalf. What is the acceptable exchange rate for Israel? How many Palestinians must die for Israel to exact revenge for every Israeli life lost? That was his question. What would you say?
Are you talking about Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, the cardiologist?
That's right, sir.
I happen even to know him. I even happen to know him. He's a very serious person, very highly respected Palestinian voice and person.
I interviewed
And
him this week, sir.
my answer the following. We will run after each and every one of those probably 3,000 Hamas operators, terrorists that came to Israel. We will run after each and every one of citizens of Gaza who entered Israel as a result of this operation, and whether rob people or kill people or rape someone or whatever. But we have no interest to hurt any Palestinian citizen. We would be happy, unlike the Palestinian terrorists, who would not have been happy if they would find the area empty from Israeli, they could kill no one. They slaughtered people in their homes, in their beds, with their families, babies in front of their parents, and vice versa. And we cannot afford it continuing. We would love and prefer, unlike our rivals, not to have any single innocent Palestinian elderly or a baby being killed. And it's only there only because the Hamas hold them. We warn them once and again, every day, please move to the other side of the strip, and you will be safe. We won't run after you. We don't want you to die. We want you to live happily with your family. But as long as you are at the place where the Hamas is deployed, and we have to attack them, you are at risk. And unfortunately, that's the nature of war. It's the ugly side of war, but it's there. It's not up to us. We cannot give impunity. You will never be able to fight this barbaric terror if you cannot hit those who are responsible for it. And sometimes, all along the history of war, they put it. We don't have exchange. I would prefer to see only Hamas people killed and not a single innocent Palestinian. But that's beyond my control. It's up to the Hamas. So please, Dr. Barghouti, turn to the Hamas and ask them to let these people go slowly. We will wait another day. Let them go slowly to the other part of the Gaza Strip, the southern part.
But can I tell you something, sir? All the Palestinians I've spoken to, including Yusuf Hamash, who is in Gaza, have told me there is no difference between northern and southern Gaza. No space is safe in Gaza. People are dying everywhere. There are bombings taking place everywhere. But coming back to Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who you say is a well-respected man, he said one more thing to me in that interview. He said what Israel is doing is ethnic cleansing, genocide and collective punishment. Israel wants Palestinians to leave Gaza and never come back. Your response?
It's not true. With all due respect to Dr. Barghouti, it's not true. We do not intend to send them out. It's not true that we bomb both sides. There are very few bombing strikes in the southern part, very few. People can live there. There are big tent kind of camps built by UNRWA. All these pictures that you see now are all in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and very few targets are chosen in the south part because, you know, Hamas also listened to our warning. They know that we made the southern part safe, so some of them are fleeing to this area. So we are very careful, very cautious. It's unbased claims against Israel. It's true that people are killed, and we are not happy with any one of them killed. But it's not true that we do it deliberately or that we block humanitarian kind of convoys coming into the southern part, or that we deliberately do any attack on place where we know it's a kind of hospital or school or any other installation or medical kind of pharmacy or whatever.
All right. So UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said the Hamas attacks on Israel did not happen in a vacuum. There had been 56 years of a suffocating occupation. But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas. And those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. What would you say?
You now probably hear the sirens outside. The sirens means that rockets from the Gaza Strip are coming to Tel Aviv and Tel Aviv. In every modern apartment, we have now a safety room with heavy reinforced concrete as the walls to suffer even a direct hit of a missile. That's the reason why my wife also joined me, because we have to be in the safety room. I made this place where I talk to you. It's the safety room that I made the library of. So
your wife is more than welcome on our show. Great to see her.
Yeah. In a moment you will hear, the interception by our Iron Dome that kills the rockets in order to avoid them from falling on the heads of innocent civilians, as you mentioned. So the difference is that Hamas is trying to kill innocent civilians in Tel Aviv. They failed because we developed this Iron Dome. Okay, I happen also to know Guterres very well. We were prime minister at the same time. He was prime minister of Portugal, and when I was prime minister of Israel. And he's once again, he's also a respected diplomat, but he's wrong, drawing a moral equivalence between the attack, the slaughtering of innocent civilians by the Hamas in a deliberate operation, and our response. Oh, here you hear.
The siren, okay. It's the Iron Dome intercepting the rockets, is it?
Yeah. I wonder whether you could hear, because we heard the explosions of the interception. So Guterres is a good general secretary of the UN, and I'm sure he's an honest person, but he's wrong. I think that he even kind of apologized for you, or corrected his statement later on. And I understand this is the mood in the UN. We know it for many years. The mood in the world is moving very fast from the real original perpetrators of the atrocities to those who use the right and even obligation of self-defense for their people and make certain moral equivalence, which I think is wrong on the very basic level.
Okay. So Turkish President Erdogan says Hamas is not a terrorist organization. What would you say to Erdogan?
I happen to know Erdogan as well for many years, and I met him. I remember the first time that he told me, Barak, you know that we are sister movement with the Hamas, the AKP in Turkey. I told him, what do you mean? How can you be a sister with this? These are terror, murderers. He told me, no, we are against terror, but we are sister movement. I asked him, so what it means to be sister movement if you are against their main activity, which is terror? He said, no, you should understand. We are sister movement. We believe in the same ideas, ideology, but not terror. If the Egyptians, for example, have a conflict with Hamas, without knowing the details, I tell you in advance, we are with the Hamas. And if you have any conflict with the Hamas, I tell you without asking for the details, we are supporting the Hamas. So that's one of the problems. We always say that the practices that were used in this slaughtering that the Hamas initiated remind us of Al-Qaeda and Daesh, but there is a difference. Al-Qaeda and Daesh killed many more Muslims than Jews or Christians. And they were pariah in the Arab world. Everyone hated them except for some Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. So they found themselves attacked by all the world and did not enjoy support of any other country. Hamas is different. We will destroy their military capability, even if Erdogan would not be happy with it, even if Guterres would not be happy with it. We will do it because we have to do it in order to live up to our basic commitment to our citizens. But having said that, it's true that Hamas has supporters. They have supporters in Turkey, as Erdogan said. They have the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which are not in power now. They were in power 12 years ago for a short time. And they are supporters of Hamas. And Qatar, they support the Hamas for other reasons.
And then there is Iran.
Yeah, and not to mention Iran. Iran became somehow, you know, the Hamas are Sunnite, and the Muslim Brotherhood are Sunnite movement. Iran is Shiites, but they are jump on everything that has to do with surrounding Israel with kind of a sense of readiness to clash.
Do you believe Iran is the mastermind? Many have said Iran is the mastermind of the attacks on Israel. Do you believe that?
I'm not sure. You know, the Wall Street Journal wrote some two weeks ago that according to American intelligence, the operation of this crime against humanity was approved by the Iranians in a meeting in Beirut some 2 weeks before.
Yes.
I don't believe it. I don't think that Hamas need a formal approval from Iran, but they get from Iran some money, they get some
training,
funding, of weapons,
ammunition.
Ammunition and probably some advice, but not approval. They don't need the approval. Probably they suspect, the Hamas, that the American intelligence, Israeli intelligence are penetrating Iran much deeper than they penetrate Hamas. So they probably get approval from Iran, and the Israelis get an early warning. They basically succeeded quite impressively in hiding their intention from our intelligence.
Okay. A couple of more questions, sir, before we let you go. Russian President Putin, who is waging a war of his own against Ukraine, has warned that it is wrong that innocent women, children and old people in Gaza are being punished for other people's crimes. You have something to say to Vladimir Putin?
Putin, I know for more than 20 years. From the first day he came to the Kremlin and met me many times. And he's talking out of the position of Russia right now. Russia right now joined hands against Ukraine, so it means against the West, against NATO, against America, that we belong to the other camp. We, together with the Sunnite moderate leaders in the region and Saudi Arabia, we are with the Americans. And somehow they managed to take Iran into their circle of sphere, together with the South as a whole, kind of. And so basically, you know, Iran became a military equipment exporter to Russia out of all places. They send them drones and some other munitions. So basically, they are now working together. So I'm not surprised. Basically, Putin on the very long range, he was quite, usually he was quite positive with Israel until recently, until he opened his war against Ukraine. And he deployed in Syria, and he's now working with Iran. So he takes this position out of his political position.
Okay. So let's now talk about your current Prime Minister. There are many who are saying Benjamin Netanyahu is fast losing the perception war and political ground at home. Many angry Israelis are calling for his resignation for his failure to prevent the Hamas attacks. And I also want to share with you that former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who I interviewed last week, very bluntly said, I do not like Netanyahu, I do not trust Netanyahu. He has failed as the Prime Minister and he will not last for long. What is your opinion, sir, on Netanyahu's handling of this entire situation?
You know, I'm somehow do not feel that it's proper at the beginning of a major war that whether I like him or not, he is now leading to analyze his weaknesses. The problem is not my own position about him. Basically, what happened, he lost the trust of the people. He got the trust and mandate of the people 11 months ago when he established his government. But on during the day of 7th of October, he lost any drop of trust. When you pass a poll now in Israel, you find that 80% of the public, including majority of his supporters, Likud, do believe that he is first and foremost responsible for this huge blunder that unprecedented in the history of the country. When you ask the public what they think he should do, 70% said he has to resign. Resigns. Half of them say he has to resign immediately. Some say he has to resign after the war. But Israelis think of wars as something very short. 6 days war is a week. 73 war, the most serious war until this one, was probably 2.5 weeks. And even the longest conflict we had was 5 years ago with the Hamas in Gaza. It took 2 months. People think 2 months, okay, let him resign in 2 months. When it becomes clear that it might take a year, probably more than a year, because it might spread to the north as well. The problem of Netanyahu that he lost the trust of the public. He still have a grip on his members of parliament, but they are open to the feelings of the public. And as a result of it, he's politically is much weakened. But we sent into the cabinet, the war cabinet made by joining of 2 opposition leaders, Gantz and Eisenkot, both of them senior generals, both of them were, as I mentioned earlier, both of them were commanders of the armed forces and one even minister of defense. So Israelis feel now better. Even with Netanyahu, that probably alone is not trusted enough, with these 2 cool-headed, moderate and professionals in army issues, 2 generals in the war cabinet, people feel more assured that only responsible decisions will be made about how to run the war.
So a unity government is reassuring for the people of Israel, but once this war is over, do you believe it is time for Netanyahu to go?
No, I think that I leave it to the public. I'm quite confident in the Israeli history, any political leadership who initiated a war or found itself in a big war in the last 50 years were deposed after the war. It happened in 73 war. It happened again in the 82 First Lebanese War. It happened to the same Ehud Barak you have mentioned after the Second Lebanese War in 2006. And I'm confident that Bibi feels the same, that it's quite probable that after this war, he will be removed. He won't be the only one, probably the head of the armed forces will suffer and other from the critic, but he probably understands that he might be removed when this war is over.
His days are numbered. History will repeat itself. Sir, any thoughts on the unprecedented intelligence failure that led to these attacks on Israel, the spectacular failure of the legendary Mossad and Shin Bet and the Israeli government? Maybe they were too busy dealing with domestic political turmoil. What happened?
No, I don't think there has anything to deal with this dispute, debate. But on one aspect, to which I will come in a moment, it is really a major failure of our intelligence, both strategically and in the night before the attack, and a great disappointment. And I'm confident that, like in 9/11 or the case of our 73 war, or even go further into the past, you find the Pearl Harbor or the Barbarossa. In retrospect, you always find that there was a lot of pieces of information that converged toward warning of this, of what's going to happen, which were interpreted wrongly by human weaknesses, by inertia, by seeing so many cases where you were suspicious of something and nothing happened, so you become a little bit lazy and more and less alert. It will be clarified only after the war, but it's clear that it's a major failure of our intelligence system. Mossad is not really part of it, but Secret Service and Intelligence Service of the Armed Forces are deep into it, and they admit it. It's a major failure, but we cannot correct it in retrospect.
Final question, sir. How long, in your assessment, could this war last, and how heavy a price do you think both sides will pay?
There is no easy way to assess it. On the very optimistic side, it might end up with a quick kind of destruction of Hamas. It might take 3 months or 5 or 6 months, doesn't matter, and rescue of the hostages. But it seems to be extremely optimistic to see both happen together. Because in order to clarify the hostage issue fully, when the Hamas is aware of the fact that once they give us all the hostages, we might start a major operation against them. So they have incentive to drag it. So it's not easy to bring together the priority of releasing the hostages with the intention to complete fully the operation of the ground and paralyzing them from their military capabilities. And the same applies to the other uncertainty. If it develops into a war with Lebanon as well, with Hezbollah, with some militias, Shiite militias backed by Iran in Syria, or whatever, that might take much longer time and much more losses of life here and destruction on the other side, probably in our cities as well. That's the nature of war. That's why we prefer not to have war, to have short war. But if we are demanded by realities to fight, we will fight and we will win. So it might take a few months, it might take several years. I cannot tell you for sure, no one can tell at this stage.
Absolutely. Sir, you've been very kind and generous with your time. Thank you so much for answering my long list of questions. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims on both sides, and we hope to see an end to this war at the earliest. Mr. Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank all the viewers of Channel 9.
Thank you, sir. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
All right, and as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens tonight, there is some disturbing news that we have from Qatar. 8 former officers of the Indian Navy have been handed the death penalty in Qatar following allegations of spying for Israel. Calling the judgment shocking, the Foreign Ministry said it would not comment much on the case given the confidential nature of proceedings, but assured that it would contest the case. The men, including decorated officers who once commanded major Indian warships, who were working for Dara Global Technologies and Consultancy Services, a private firm that provided training and related services to Qatar's armed forces. Sources say some of them were working on a highly sensitive project, Italian technology-based midget submarines with stealth characteristics. The men have been in jail since August 2022 and went to trial in March this year. Since being granted consular access to them, New Delhi has been working to secure their release. Their bail pleas were rejected multiple times and their detention extended by Qatari authorities. Today, the Court of First Instance of Qatar passed a judgment. India's Foreign Ministry said, "We are deeply shocked by the verdict of the death penalty and are awaiting the detailed judgment. We're in touch with the families and the legal teams, and we're exploring all legal options. We attach high importance to the case and have been following it closely. We'll continue to extend all consular and legal assistance. We'll take up the verdict with Qatari authorities." That's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Do join us again tomorrow.
They picked my husband. He was tortured there for 2 years.